Now let's hear from our panel regarding the, again, I'm knocked off. Now let's hear from our panel regarding COVID-19's impact on the talent pipeline and more. Joining us today are Deidre Flournoy, Vice President of Human Resources with Merchant Distributors LLC, Lisa Lassiter, Administrator of Health Careers with Vidant Health, Cassi Zumbiel, Director of Workforce Initiatives with the National Association of Manufacturers and a North Carolina Chamber alum, and our moderator, Leslie Walden, Vice President of Public Affairs with Fidelity Investments. Leslie, the stage is yours. Leslie, you're on mute.
And doesn't that happen
It does.
5 or 6 times during everyone's day? I'll share with you all that we have a game at Fidelity Investments that if somebody is caught on mute, everybody must hydrate and take a swig of water. So thank you all for that. And but I wanted to first thank you, Deborah, and all of the team at the Chamber for inviting us to have this important conversation. I was thrilled to see the attendee list has so many members of business and industry, and then our education partners as well. It's almost like a 60-40 out there, so it's terrific. And we hope everybody's going to engage and use the question and answer feature of this segment so that we can have a conversation with you. I'd also like to thank Susan Gates of SAS. You know, she has provided great leadership for the Chamber on the Education and Workforce Committee, and she's the one who prepped us for this conversation today. So we appreciate all that you've done to get us ready for today. And what we're going to talk about with these great panelists is how to get business and the education system aligned. Business needs the skills and the skilled workers, and education is providing them. So how can we work better together? The pandemic and the recent focus on racial inequality has impacted those efforts, and we'll talk about that today. But I really want to focus today on you're going to walk away with some hows. You're going to walk away with some approaches and ideas, what to bring back after you get off of this Zoom call and get on the next one, as conversation starters when you go back to your companies and back to your education partners and back to your team meetings. What steps are you going to take based on the ideas you've heard today? So you've heard who the panelists are. We have great representation from the healthcare sector, from manufacturing, and from retail. So we've got a lot of the North Carolina industries covered here. But really there's a lot of, in the prep that we've discussed, there's a lot of common themes across these industries that apply to my industry and financial services that will apply to others. So we hope everybody will take something away from what we have today. And I thought I'd start with just a really easy, simple, straightforward question for all 3 of our panelists, and I'll let you answer when you're ready. What are the top 2 skills that your company or your organization or your industry are looking for right here and right now? Panelists, would you like to answer?
Hi, I can start. Can you hear me, Leslie?
Yes, sounds great. And anybody who was on mute, take a drink of water.
So the manufacturing sector is interesting. It's going through a shift. Automation is becoming extremely important and a really critical part of our sector. And so I think traditionally we would probably say those digital skills are one of the top 2 for sure. but also teamwork, problem solving, critical thinking. I know I'm giving you way more than 2, but I think that those are also those employability skills are sometimes more challenging to find. We hear from our manufacturing members, and some really, really critical, especially as we do become a more automated sector.
So Cassie, that's a great one because you gave us hard skills and soft skills. Lisa, Dedra, what are your top ones?
Well, I can almost mirror what she's saying. Customer service is a huge thing in our industry, and you might not think of that in healthcare, but it truly is about the patient and the family. So having people that have really good customer service, and of course, to echo what Cassie said, we work in an interdisciplinary team manner. We don't work in isolation or silos. So it's ultimately important for you to be able to work as a teammate with others. And I know you said too. I know you said too, but critical thinking is so important as well.
Good morning. I would also agree with my fellow panelists, and I would say for us, change management is really a key skill that we're also looking for, and project management as we continue to work across functions in multiple disciplines, facing a number of various challenges, I think both within the workplace and then externally in the marketplace would be 2 that I would add.
Great start. So I think we have a great idea of what you're looking for. Bonus question, what has changed during the pandemic through remote and virtual work? Are there additional skills? Dr. Walden was talking about a few this morning. Are there additional skills that you might be looking for that our education partners need to be thinking about offering at this time, post-pandemic?
Well, I can tell you from a healthcare industry that we're used to being there on the campus, hands-on, and a lot of us got pushed out being remote. So those that did not have an appreciation for the information systems team certainly do at this point, because their work is critical to us being able to continue our work from a distance, those that are able to do that. So they were always appreciated inside because of electronic medical records and whatnot, but I don't know that those that were not direct patient care had as great of appreciation. So those IT skills are really highlighted right now.
And in healthcare, what kind of IT skills training do workers typically get? If if that's becoming increasingly important, what kind of training do they typically get in that space?
Well, I can't really speak directly to that because that's not my arena, but I know that being able to access all the different programs that we need from a remote area, actually being able to tap in through VPN, because it has to be a secure access, because HIPAA is still very important to us at all levels. So just being able to access just the logistics and the programming and being able to make sure that the connection is strong for us.
What new skills in retail, Dedra? What new skills post-pandemic? What are you finding that folks need?
Sure. So merchants, distributors is wholesale distribution, and we work collaboratively with our independents in the retail space. What we're finding is that a focus really on communication skills is critical and important. I would say that we've challenged our leaders to make sure that they're also leading from a space of compassion, which may or may not be something that we talk about very often, but our employees, our customers are dealing with these unprecedented times and a variety of issues. So I'm sure we've touched on even earlier today, right? The fact that, an employee may wear many hats, they're homeschooling, they are managing the day-to-day. So what we're finding is the better we're able to create those human connections, even in a virtual space, is helping us to be both much more productive, but also more collaborative.
And do you think these skills are being developed just simply on the job, through the virtual environments that we're living in now? I know we're all gaining new skills on the job, or is there specific sources for those developing those skills?
I do think a lot of it is on the job training, right, as we're all drinking through the fire hose a bit. But we've also tapped into LinkedIn Learning, other sources that can help to really highlight maybe some of the leadership skills that can be most useful during this time.
Tell us a little more about LinkedIn Learning. I'm not familiar.
So it's a platform that, whether through videos or they make book recommendations, there are some virtual courses as well, which I would describe as both the opportunity for soft as well as more technical skills.
Great, thank you. And Cassie, what about manufacturing? Any new skills emerging? Maybe the same ones that Lisa and Dedra identified, or maybe some others?
Yes, definitely the ones that were already identified are going to be really important. I think manufacturing skills are unique, probably similar to healthcare actually, where a lot of the training comes from that hands-on component, whether they're at the community college, university, or even in high school, learning those skills hands-on. And so working with educators to really find new and unique ways to train those hands-on skills will be really important during this time, and potentially something that we use even after we're through this crisis.
Okay. And thinking about before the pandemic, Cassie, what kinds of education partnerships were in place at the time? And what are you finding successful in terms of working with your education partners?
Yeah, that's probably been one of the most rewarding parts of my job throughout this crisis, is to see how many of those partnerships are still existing and actually getting stronger because of the world we're currently living in. So apprenticeships has been, or earn and learn programs, and programs that have been really successful in manufacturing. You really get that education component and that hands-on learning. I think we were a little nervous that those might go away because of everything we're dealing with right now, but we've actually seen some really unique and powerful partnerships come together to make sure that those can still happen, because manufacturers know the skills gap is unfortunately not going anywhere right now, and so we can't just walk away from these education and manufacturing partnerships. We really have to find ways to make them successful. And luckily, we've seen a lot of apprenticeship programs that have continued to stay strong and find new and unique ways to continue to work together throughout all of this.
So are you taking some apprenticeships virtual? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So we actually are the stewards of a program called FAME. It was started by Toyota North America and Kentucky, and now is spread to over 13 states, and there's more than 400 companies engaged across the country. And what we've seen those programs do locally is work with their education provider to take as much online as possible, build what they call safe classrooms. So whether that's really isolating specific pockets within a classroom where individuals can come in and get that hands-on learning is one way, or they're working with their manufacturing partner to have that hands-on learning that would normally happen at the education provider or the community college happen within the manufacturing facility, kind of in safe areas. So we've seen really combinations of different ways to continue to make sure that education is still happening.
And thinking back, how did you kick that off, Cassie, when that program first was getting off the ground, whether you were there or not? Maybe it precedes you, but what do you think that first step to get a relationship or a partnership like that going was? What's the spark?
I think the key word that you just used is relationship. So it had to be a relationship between the educators and the companies, and trying to find a way to have the languages match up. One thing I think that sometimes happens between employers and educators is that they're not speaking the same language sometimes. And so starting these apprenticeship programs, I think you kind of have to start from that base level of building that relationship and making sure that you're talking the same language and understanding what both partners need in that relationship to make it successful for the apprentice ultimately.
And that's a great one for the whole panel. We are speaking different languages, whether it's depending on what sector we're in, education, industry, even within our industries. For anyone on the panel, do you have a good example of when we weren't speaking the same language? to help illuminate that?
Yeah, so I too have tapped into the community colleges in our area and started really making sure that we're creating the right pipeline of talent. And so in particular, as we talk about for our organization, we have a garage and we maintain our fleet of vehicles. So that's a wide net, right? There are a variety of certifications. The level and degree of intricacy in terms of maintenance can vary. And so over the course of the last several months, we've been talking about how do we provide skill development, but also recognize that there probably will be a cap in terms of what we will be doing in-house as part of our maintenance of the fleet versus those things that we would still look for outside sources. So that would be a good example.
Great example. And, you know, I think, Dedra, you have experience with the Talent Pipeline Management, we call it TPM program. Can you sort of segue into that and tell us, you know, a little bit about that and how it's working for you?
Sure. So I was very fortunate through the NC Chamber to be a part of the first cohort, for Talent Pipeline Management. And it essentially says, what are some of the continuous improvement and process tools that we use in terms of manufacturing and or other continuous improvement efforts, and apply that same lens to talent pipelining with both a short-term as well as a long-term strategic lens. And so essentially, we're partnering with community leaders, with business, as well as with our education partners, and identifying critical skills that are needed within our region, and or specifically as I partner with the Chamber of Commerce here locally in Catawba County. So for my organization, things and skills such as I mentioned, garage maintenance, we also recognize that information technology and that skill set remains critical. Also within our region, definitely in the healthcare space, nursing, are other areas. So employers and community leaders and education leaders can come together to begin identifying what is the magnitude of the need, what does the pipeline look like both short-term and long-term, using the tools provided by the Academy.
So scoping it out sounds like the first step. Then what happens?
Well, and then that's when the heavy lifting starts, right? Mm-hmm. And so I should probably mention this is a multi-pronged and likely a multi-year process, right? So you have to kind of wash, rinse, and repeat. But once you've identified the needs, and you know, the Academy encourages you to only come out with a handful, right? Because you're not going to be able to devote the right relationship and collaboration efforts if you're spread too thin. Obviously, what are some of the investments that are required as you're building these pipelines? And so it really is very strategic. So from there, it is how do you bring the various constituencies together in meaningful ways, and recognize that it is the tide that lifts all boats. And so the better and more nimble we are as educators, as employers, and as community activists, we can help to put the right emphasis and the right momentum behind building those skills. And so the teams come together, they meet around those priorities, we talk through kind of how can we identify the horizon. So you look at perhaps retirement projections, you look at kind of what's in the pipeline on the front end, looking at the mix of both experienced workers as well as those who may be recent graduates or soon to be graduates. So that's just kind of to name a few.
Big work for sure. Lisa, I want to get to you, but first I want to acknowledge that we have a question or two coming in on the Q&A, and we really want this to be a conversation, so keep those coming, and we will we'll try to answer those live as we go. But Lisa, tell us a little bit about some of the successful partnerships that that you've been able to create with Vidant, and you know, how did those get off the ground?
Vidant has really been in this environment of partnering with the school systems since early 2000. Our CEO and the local school superintendent decided to join forces to at that time address a nursing shortage that we had, but that nursing shortage has kind of really spread itself into a lot of other disciplines as well through the years. And that was getting a dedicated individual within Vidant Health that did workforce development. And at that time, they created something called the Health Sciences Academy. This is actually within the local school system. It is not a separate school, and we run a roster of somewhere between 900, and we flex up during recruitment to about 1,100 students that have an interest in healthcare. And what this is all about is really exposing them to what healthcare opportunities exist, as well as what the realities are. I know today, not just our youth, but all individuals are really swayed with what they see on television and the drama aspect of that. So sometimes what they think, any discipline, nursing, physicians, respiratory therapists, and so on, actually do day to day is not realistic. And when you work in some of the larger entities, and then in my area, we serve a very rural population as well. Sometimes what they think it is and what the reality is very different. So we do exposure events, lots of exposure events. And with that, we do a lot of leadership development and working on those soft skills. You know, one of the presenters earlier was talking about that, you know, being away, being remote is in, and direct, you know, touching and being with people is out. But in healthcare, I mean, you can only take telemedicine, and I mean, that is a great resource for those that it's appropriate for, but you can only take that so far. And then you are definitely going to have to be able to face-to-face with your patients and your patients' families to serve them. So the Health Sciences Academy was so successful in Pitt County that in 2012, we actually spread that over to Duplin County, because that picks up a very different area and population that it serves. So that partnership is truly the community, the education sector, because it's Vidant Health and Pitt Community College, East Carolina University, Brody School of Medicine, the dental medicine at School of Dental Medicine at ECU, Eastern AHEC, and our local Greenville Pitt County Chamber of Commerce. And we're able to offer them a variety of opportunities to see all those different arenas, as well as prepping them for the future as far as SAT workshops and ACT workshops, letting them see the schools that are in our surrounding area, because obviously we want to look at a homegrown perspective and keep them local. That is one of the challenges that we have in a rural setting, is attracting and retaining those students, because they want to go to those metropolitan areas that are so much more exciting and more things to do. And so keeping them home, sometimes homegrown as individuals, is best for us. And then also connecting into the schools as far as the teachers, working with them so that they're aware of what healthcare is, the opportunities in healthcare, because they are with those students every single day, and they can guide them to what may be appropriate. So it's really important that they know what the opportunities in healthcare are. And not everybody has to be forward facing or direct patient care. There's a lot of behind the scenes people that also support that work.
So you just touched on a question that just came in through the Q&A, and it's a great one from Sandy Wheat, who runs the North Carolina Council for Economic Education. So she's providing professional development and personal finance to teachers every day. But Lisa, you mentioned, you know, getting the teachers involved and helping expose students to healthcare careers. How do teachers, how do they get that?
So we actually bring the teachers on our campus. I'll just tell you about one effort with that. You know, we offer shadowing and tours on our campus anyway, but a more direct and focused approaches. They have a Teachers Executive Institute here locally that is actually has 20 teachers that are selected out of the school system. And we bring them to our campus on 2 different dates. The first date, we do some leadership training with them on personality and learning styles. And the second day, we bring them in on campus for a shadow day where we affix them to the hip of different clinicians so that they can actually see that environment, what the work entails, the strengths and the learning knowledge that is required for those positions. And anytime you're following any discipline, like I said earlier, we're an interdisciplinary approach, you're going to see all the other teammates that work within that same arena. So it's a really good day for them. It's always educational. And I say, when you can teach the teachers, that's a really great day. And they can take that information back to the classroom the very next day. It's not even something that takes forever. The very next day, they can go in there and start talking to those students. And that just opens more and more doors.
You know, it seems to me that in this day and age when, you know, back in the day, we all went to our guidance counselor for ideas, and we know that they all have caseloads that are, you know, larger than life, and they're dealing with more issues than I think when we were all growing up. And, you know, I don't know about your teenagers, but they don't listen to me on these things. So, you know, equipping the teachers and the educators to share these opportunities and this exposure seems to be the best route. And, you know, Cassi, you talked about apprenticeships. If you know, there are educators in the audience today on the Zoom call, how do they find out about apprenticeships and how to plug into those so that they can offer them to their students?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things, I think one of the most important lessons I've learned about apprenticeships is that they have to be business-led, which then creates challenges for educators who really want to engage or start their own programs or have great ideas. So I would encourage your local chambers are always a great place to start. They often know what's happening in their communities and can really plug you in. Also, the NC Chamber is also a good place to reach out to, I would suggest, to learn about those things. But I also wanted to highlight Manufacturing Day, which is coming up on October 2nd. It's the first Friday in October. It's a little different this year for educators who participated in the past because can't go into most manufacturing facilities right now, which is typically how Manufacturing Day happens, is we encourage manufacturers to open their doors to allow individuals in. So one thing as a teacher I would encourage is go to creatorswanted.org. That's our website that's going to host where all of the Manufacturing Day events will be hosted, and there will be a lot of online virtual events that are happening, which is really an opportunity for educators who maybe don't have a manufacturing plant close to them, but can really expose their students in a way that they maybe weren't able to in past Manufacturing Day events. So hopefully once you participate in Manufacturing Day, maybe you'll find some other ways to also engage in apprenticeships too in your community.
Cassi, can you repeat that website, please? Sure,
creatorswanted.org.
Okay, and a question came in, if virtual field trips are an option, and I'll let anyone on the panel, after Cassi answer that one.
My answer is yes, and then I'll let other people jump in too.
And how would that work? What would a virtual field trip look like, and what does that take for you to put on, or for the employer to put on?
Yeah, so we actually have resources for that too on creatorswanted.org. We're finding ways to 3D map manufacturing plants so that you can literally almost walk through the manufacturing plant. The student can virtually walk through the manufacturing plant in a way that they wouldn't have been able to before. So there's some really exciting, cool ways that we're finding manufacturers are really engaging there. And I think that there's a lot of resources on that creatorswanted.org website to figure out ways that maybe your facility specifically can get engaged.
What kind of virtual platform do they need? Do you know? Is it Zoom like this? Is it, I know schools are using Teams quite a bit.
I know that there's lots. I think that one of our goals is to make this as user-friendly as possible. So I think that Zoom and Skype are some options, but there's also going to be some where it's more of like a recording. And so we have a whole team that's excellent at helping manufacturers find different ways to engage on this, and can use plenty of different platforms that really work for them and also for the education providers too.
Dedra, I see you nodding your head here. You know, do you have something to chime in here?
So I would say that this is a new area for us as well. We've been working on creating a lot of videos and content that we could put on our website so that people have a real clear idea of what a day in the life might be for some of the roles that we have. It's also an opportunity to showcase the fact that, you know, although we are grocery distributors, we actually are a full suite company that has services and finance and information technology. So how can we bring to life the wide number of opportunities that exist? The other thing that we're finding is, even for our employees, creating learning opportunities through our learning management system and that platform is also a good way that we've been able to tap into some of our existing technology.
How about you, Lisa?
So this has been a actual opportunity offered to us through COVID, because normally we just brought them on campus. So the concept of, well, how do you still show that, and how are you still respectful of your patients and families and staying to make sure that you're protecting with HIPAA. So we actually just had a Destination Health Careers summer camp where we had different individuals come into a Zoom meeting. Now, it took a great deal of logistical management behind the scenes on that to have them come, but they talked about their areas and the schooling that was required to go into their specific areas, and they were able to take command of the screen and show some of the different areas and equipment that they used, and it actually turned out so much better than what we had even anticipated. But we are looking more towards a long-term, more professional way to do that versus trying to call those individuals out, because we have an enormous amount of requests for different exposures in different areas. So we're working with our partners to try to get a video together that highlights all the different areas and disciplines that we can use repeatedly versus, you know, trying to tap into individuals on a daily basis out of their normal daily routine.
So Lisa, that's a great one, because we always talk about the challenges that have come through the pandemic and, you know, and living in this world that we're living in. But there are some opportunities that have emerged. I mean, look at us here. We're able to drop into this without getting into a car. And quite frankly, I don't have my business suit on today, which I normally would if I were doing this in person. Dedra, Cassi, any other silver linings, opportunities that have come out of this current environment for what you're trying to accomplish with your education partners?
Sure, I can start. So one of the challenges with manufacturing, unlike healthcare or retail, is that a lot of people don't know what happens within those four walls. That's why we do things like Manufacturing Day. And one of our challenges with the skills gap is that it's not only that people don't have the skills, but they don't want to enter the manufacturing career because they think that manufacturing's dirty, dark, and dangerous, and they just don't have a full understanding of what manufacturers do for our country. And I do think that, at least in my dream world, that this crisis has shown how essential manufacturer workers are. I know obviously healthcare workers have been so essential throughout this crisis, but manufacturers have really stepped up to the plate and shown up every single day to make sure we had food on our tables, make sure that hopefully we have a vaccine, and manufacturers will be the ones producing this. And I think for an educator, this is an opportunity to highlight not only the heroes that showed up in healthcare facilities, but also the heroes that showed up in the manufacturing facilities. And to me, that's one silver lining that I hope can continue to change what the perception of being a manufacturer is in this country, and encourage more people to want to go into the manufacturing field.
So in my realm, I would piggyback off of that as well. So by being in grocery, we were fortunate enough to be, I think, on the opposite end of the spectrum, where we actually saw significant volume increases. And so we had to pivot on a dime. We had to engage about 600 people as potential trainees to be able to come into our facility. We're very fortunate that a number of those people are actually school age. So whether they were high schoolers and or college students who were no longer able to go on campus, they now had meaningful work opportunities that I think went a long way in terms of helping them to stabilize their families. We partnered with our local convention center because we needed to create a real world training space off-site to be able to accommodate that sheer number of people we were training. We reached out to our community colleges, particularly those that had CDL programs, so that we could turn on a dime and increase our driver population. So those were a number of things that we did.
Silver linings playbook for sure. You know, we got a great question in from Nancy Johnston, which I really like, and that it sort of opens up a whole new world. Just the recognition that maybe those of us in industry had an easier time adapting to this virtual environment because we do get training at work, and we do have a lot of resources that maybe our education or our educators may not have access to. Any thoughts of what we can be doing to support our educational infrastructure system to make sure that educators are as up to date and ready to perform in this virtual environment so that they can be the partners that we need them to be?
So I will have to kind of say, I'll put a plug in it and just kind of wait to see how it comes to fruition. But, you know, we recognize that employers and educators and community really need to have very strong ties. One of the things we've been contemplating is how can we partner with our educators and reach into the school system, especially as they're doing virtual learning. So, you know, we've seen, I think even in the media where, whether it was story time or exposing students to real world scenarios and partnering with educators to bring that to life, how do we teach differently and how do we help people, particularly students tied to what they're learning, that there really is a very real life context and how they can use those skills, right? And so I think as we try to be more innovative, are there ways to create those platforms using this virtual space through Teams or Zoom or however, where before we may not have on career day or other ways reached into our school systems, now we're a little untethered and have the luxury of being a bit more creative.
Lisa,
Our colleges and universities have actually been doing online teaching for quite some time. So when you talk about the symbiotic relationship between business and education, I really think this is where education gives to us because they're already experts on this area because they've been doing it for years and years. So I think they have a whole lot to offer us.
That's a really great point. Online learning has been going on for a long time already. How do we shift it to a broader population? Cassie, any thoughts on this question of, you know, just supporting this remote learning environment? We know there's so many gaps and so many opportunities.
Yeah, so much of my work I do at a national level, but I'm fortunate to get to see often what happens at the local level. And what I've been seeing, and that's been really amazing, is manufacturers and other employers stepping up in different ways, whether it's helping buy laptops for students who don't have access or figuring out different broadband opportunities and those kinds of things. And so unfortunately, this challenge, like so many other challenges in education, is something that really needs to be solved at the local level. And so again, this is a great opportunity to reach out to your local employers and your community to really highlight some of the challenges you're seeing as an educator and try and figure out if there is ways locally to kind of address those challenges with their local community members in different ways.
Great action item. We remember we were going to give you some hows in this conversation, not just what the problems are and the best practices. And Nancy followed up saying, you know, K-12 may not be where higher education is. So creating some partnerships between those two might be an opportunity. I'll just mention Fidelity serving on a remote learning working group that the North Carolina Business Committee for Education has spearheaded. They've done some remote learning conferences and are working on this digital divide. So that might be a resource